All right, welcome to the Big Texas Podcast presented by Texas Young Republicans. I'm your host, Jordan Overturf. I am social distancing like the rest of you should be. Hopefully you are doing everything you can to help flatten the curve, stop the spread. You know all the catchy phrases. What a wild time we are living in, but it looks like we are finding out more and more how in control our system is here in Texas to be prepared to take on these various measures. The governor is giving us some great leadership, getting rid of regulations left and right, not necessarily forever, but waiving certain regulations to ensure that we have the staffing needs necessary at local hospitals, that we have telemedicine available statewide so we can reach farther parts of the state, or doctors elsewhere can help just ease the burden of those in the major metropolitan areas that are really feeling the crunch as more cases are reported. We're up to about 5 deaths here in Texas, so we continue to watch the news. Plenty more going on with RPT as all political activities are put on hold for the next couple months. If you haven't seen, the governor postponed both local elections in early May and the May 26th runoff. The runoff has been pushed to July, and the local elections are allowed to postpone till November 3rd. We'll see what kind of happens as local municipalities, school boards, things like that decide what they're going to do about their local elections. But in the meantime, we focus on the efforts here in the state of Texas. Again, the governor doing a lot to make sure that our trucking industry is running at full capacity, to make sure the store shelves continue to be stocked, taken care of. It's been real interesting to watch and see how our state has weathered this storm. Initially, I know a lot of folks didn't take this seriously, but now the message seems to be getting through. And while, there are some complaining, struggling, it's bare minimum compared to some of the things we faced in our history. So we are going to get through this. We know this is tough, but Texans are tougher, and we're going to help each other through this. That includes my guest today. Will Douglas is a Republican candidate running in House District 113. This used to be held by Cindy Burkett. Burkett. We appreciate Chairwoman Burkett and all she did when she was serving in the legislature. That seat was taken over by Retta Andrews Bowers. She is a freshman Democrat in that seat, but Will is a very promising candidate. I had a good time talking to him. He has done what many other campaigns have done and postponed all of his campaign activities for the time being, and is focusing on working with his employees. He actually owns a few pharmacies in the North Texas area, and he talks about what he's had to do as a small business owner and a specialist in this field to prepare his business, prepare his customers for the response to coronavirus. So it's real interesting to get an inside take from someone who is weathering this from multiple fronts. And I had a great time talking to him. I'm sure you'll enjoy his comments on this as well. So, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Will Douglas. Provide our listeners with a brief recap of your background and experience.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first of all, Jordan, thanks for having me on. This is my first podcast, so I guess I'm officially a millennial now. So that's pretty exciting stuff. So just about me, I'm originally from Oklahoma. I grew up in a small rural community just north of the Red River. I grew up in a blue collar family. Just typical rural American family. My mom was a stay-at-home mom, took care of me and my little brother. My dad was a blue-collar worker and is still to this day the hardest worker I know. My uncle was the most successful person that I knew. He was a pharmacist out in southwestern Oklahoma, and he was just able to provide for his family in a way that I knew that I wanted to be be able to provide for my family one day. So growing up, I thought that if I want to be successful, then I have to be a pharmacist. I didn't know anything else. I didn't know attorneys or doctors or engineers or whatever else. So I had three goals, growing up, and that was to go to college, to become a pharmacist, and to live in Dallas. I was just always drawn to Dallas, Texas. I'd come down here and visit family, and then I remember just never wanting to leave because of the big buildings and the bright lights, and it was just it might as well have been Manhattan for me. And whenever I got to college, I made friends with people that were from here, and they just had kind of a different demeanor about them, this desire for success and a passion for what they did. It was just a little different than what I had experienced growing up. And so I was just drawn to that. And so after college, I went to pharmacy school. And before I'd even graduated pharmacy school fully, I'd moved down to Dallas. I accepted a job with Walgreens and here in the DFW market. And so I bounced around all over this region of Texas, from as far west as Wichita Falls and as far east as Longview. And so I was able to learn, this region of Texas really well, because I spent a lot of time on the road, bouncing back and forth between stores, and gave me a lot of great experience. But I knew that ultimately I wanted to follow in my uncle's footsteps and to be to own my own pharmacies, mom and pop type independent pharmacies. And so about 7 months into my job at Walgreens, I got a call from a buddy who I graduated pharmacy school with, and he told me about an opportunity up in Pilot Point, which is about an hour north of Dallas, that they would need a pharmacist to come up there and manage the store. And so I went up there, and they hired me on the spot, and they told me that they were going to be selling the store in a few months to a guy in Dallas who owned several pharmacies. And so I knew I was going to get the opportunity to learn from someone who was literally doing what I wanted to do, which was to own multiple pharmacies. And so I worked for him for 18 months and learned a lot. And he had an opportunity to buy a pharmacy or buy another pharmacy, and he wasn't able to do it at the time. So he passed that opportunity to me and got me in touch with his bank and kind of walked me through the acquisition process. And 2 months later, this is in 2015, I owned a pharmacy. So at the age of 29, I completed all my goals in life, and I felt like I had truly lived the American dream. And a couple years later, my wholesale company reached out to me and told me about another pharmacy that was on the market, and the owner, he wanted someone to buy it who would keep it independent, but he had only really gotten offers from the chain stores that they would buy out the store and close it down, and that's like 20 jobs in a small town that are going to be lost. And so, 4 months of work and working with the bank, and we were able to acquire it. And so it was a really awesome experience to go from working at Walgreens to owning multiple pharmacies in just a few short years. And then
it certainly seems like you have the work ethic and the drive to pursue your goals and dreams. So how did that kind of passion and desire get directed to politics and getting involved in this race?
Well, yeah. So that same year, after me and my business partner had bought the second pharmacy, we took a trip with a bunch of friends up to Manhattan, up in New York, and man, it would be awesome if we had a pharmacy up here. And had an excuse to go up here every month or so to check in on things. And so when we got back to Dallas, we were I was talking to my other business partner, and come find out he was in Manhattan on the same exact weekend that we were. And so we kind of thought that could be a sign that maybe we should try to do something up that way. So reached out to a wholesale company, told them we were interested in that market, and they got us in touch with a guy who was looking to sell a store. And so I flew back up there and met with him, and it was a really interesting business. It was kind of this concierge pharmacy concept there in Manhattan. It was next to Central Park. It catered to high-end apartment complexes or high-end towers, including Trump Towers. So that tells you about the clientele that they had. And so the owner wanted to sell it to us, and so we got the ball rolling on it. And so we just tried to implement the same business model that we have here up there. And after a few months, it was just the reality that it just wouldn't translate, because in New York, there's just a lot more regulation. There's a lot more taxes. They place a bunch of undue burden on small businesses. And so after a few months of trying to make it happen, it just fell apart. It just wasn't feasible. And so that was my first experience in understanding what it really meant for Texas to be a business-friendly state, because other states just aren't like Texas. And this was, I guess by now, this is spring 2018. And so then you have, the fall with the election cycle and the blue wave that came through Texas. And you asked me why I decided to get involved, because for me, it's a realization that if Texas turns blue, then stories like mine aren't possible. I truly believe that I've lived the American dream, and so I want to ensure that other kids can move down here, kids that grow up here, have the same opportunities allotted to them that I have.
Now, as you have suspended your campaign activities as of right now, right?
Correct. Yes.
Well,
we're reaching out to folks via social media and phone calls, obviously, but the campaign is definitely on the back burner.
So, where has your priority and focus been, this past week as things have changed and evolved here in the state of Texas?
All my focus, the majority of my focus right now is just on the pharmacies and making sure that we're able to still serve the communities in what I think is going to be a pretty bad crisis. First of all, I'm fortunate to have a business that is staying open. It's healthcare, and I've told my staff multiple times this week, even if the world's ending around us, we will still be at work taking care of people. And when you work in healthcare, that's what you sign up for. So Monday, I made the decision to close the front end of the stores. So customers, patients can't walk into the store. They have to use the drive-through, or we'll come out to them curbside, much like food chains or restaurants are doing. We don't want patients coming in, because when you work in healthcare, you're just going to continuously get inundated with people who are sick. And so I have to take care of my staff, take care of my employees, to make sure that they're healthy, to take care of patients. So every morning, employees get their temperatures taken before they're allowed into the store, and we're disinfecting high touch areas multiple times a day, cleaning the store really well, trying our best to make sure that we're healthy, so we can take care of sick people.
So, what is kind of your role in the pharmacy side of things as you prepare for the response, and what are some of the directives you're receiving from the state or state health agencies? Yeah.
Well, for me, I mean, I function, it's more of a CEO type role. On a typical day to day, I'm not the pharmacist on the counter. Every once in a while, I function in that manner. I had some this week, but the majority is leadership and management. And so, making sure that all of our policies are going to, still be able to be utilized, and to make sure that we're able to get medicine out. And one of the biggest things that I'm focused on right now is making sure that we have employees or people that we can call in, reserve employees as needed, if our people get sick. I mean, it's a really technical job, and you can't just plug anyone in there. So I have to make sure I have plenty of technicians and a few additional pharmacists lined up just in case my employees get sick. From the state on a pharmacy level, the Texas Pharmacy Association has done an incredible job of understanding the needs that pharmacies have right now, and making sure that we are that we don't become a burden on healthcare, but instead we're able to relieve some of the pressure that's put on doctors' offices. So one of the things that came down yesterday is they've temporarily suspended refill requests, and so basically that means is when someone needs to get their blood pressure medicine refilled and there's no refills left on the prescription, typically what a pharmacy does is send a refill request to the doctor. Well, right now, doctors and nurses are having to focus on a lot more urgent issues than blood pressure medicine. And so pharmacies now have the authorization to just add refills onto that as needed, as long as it's maintenance medication. This isn't controlled substances, opioids, anything like that. Just run-of-the-mill maintenance meds. And so that's going to take a lot of pressure off doctors' offices, so that way that they can just focus on this crisis.
And where did who handed that directive down?
That came down from the state board. I think they had been working with Governor Abbott, the Texas Pharmacy Association, to get that in place. And then just some minor, well, not really minor. One of the things is usually insurance companies and the state board requires people to get their signature whenever they pick up a prescription. Obviously, we don't want people signing on stuff and writing on stuff and handing it back into the pharmacy. So that's been suspended. And another thing that pharmacies are able to do is administer flu and strep tests. We're still in the middle of flu season, and so if people present at the pharmacy with symptoms that sound like the coronavirus, and we can test them for flu and strep to rule those things out. And if it is flu and strep, in an ideal world, pharmacists would be able to give you a Tamiflu or give you an amoxicillin and send you back home. And if both of those tests come back negative and you're showing those symptoms, then we can assume what it is and then send you to the doctor. So it's just a way to take a burden off of doctors' offices, off of hospitals, because that's the main problem that we're going to have going forward is the healthcare system being overburdened. Coronavirus isn't happening in a vacuum. We still have people with normal illnesses, cancer and injuries and the flu. And now on top of that, we've got the coronavirus.
So you have the unique perspective of seeing this from the healthcare side and the small business side. I'm curious what you think of the state's response so far, and what do you think about Governor Abbott's leadership in this effort?
Yeah, well, I think the first thing I have to mention is the importance that people truly understand that this is unprecedented, and folks in leadership and folks in healthcare. We're figuring out everything as we go, and fortunately here in Texas, we have tremendous leadership. I think Governor Abbott is doing a great job in a really tough situation. Obviously yesterday the executive order to close down schools and restaurants, in an effort to flatten the curve. I think everyone at this point knows what that means and understands that, but if they don't, really what we're trying to do is to limit how quickly the virus spreads, because if it spreads too quickly, then the healthcare system will be overburdened, and that's when we're going to run into problems like they're having in Italy, to where it's just too many people at once trying to get into hospitals, trying to get into doctors' offices. So if we can stretch out the time it takes for everyone to come down with the virus, or how many patients are going to, then that's going to relieve some of that pressure on healthcare. So I think Governor Abbott is doing a tremendous job. It sounds, their incredibly receptive, I know, to just the needs of pharmacy and the healthcare system. So, yeah, we're lucky here in Texas to have a governor who's on the leading the charge on this stuff.
From your perspective, do you feel like the system is strained at the moment, or that we're actually managing expectations from the healthcare side?
Here in Texas, I don't think it's strained. Obviously, the problem we're facing is not enough tests, and why that's the case. That's out of my wheelhouse. But I do think going forward, there's going to be a bigger strain on healthcare, and it's going to be important that that's why we are implementing the temporary closures of schools and restaurants, is to slow down the rate of transmission, so that way everyone doesn't get sick at once. If it's a slow trickle, then we might be able to contain it better, might be able to get people treatment and have a much better response to it than other countries have. But yeah, right now I don't think we're strained, but I do think next week is going to present some new and unique challenges.
So everyone is obviously putting politics, or most people are putting politics aside at the moment. I can't say everyone based on what I've seen on Twitter recently, but it's hard to not look at this situation and begin to think of the implications, not from the political campaign side of things, but more the policy realm. So as you look down the line at, possibly serving in the Texas House, what do you think the legislative response to this response and this crisis will be?
That's tough to say, Jordan, because right now, obviously, you said, some people are putting politics on the back burner. There's some folks that are pointing fingers. I think there's going to be plenty of time for playing the blame game. But I'm an optimistic person, and when you look at countries like South Korea, they've had a pretty good response to it. The reason they've had that good response is because they were one of the countries that were heavily impacted by the SARS outbreak back in the early 2000s. And so their country learned from it, built the infrastructure to be able to handle viral outbreaks. And so when we come out on the other side of this, that's one of the things we're going to have to do. We're going to have to look at, where in the supply lines did we have weak spots? Where in healthcare did we have weak spots? And how can we go about mitigating this sooner the next time one of these things pop up? Because I think that's just kind of the new reality that, every 10 or 20 years or so that we're going to have one of these massive viral outbreaks. And, the only way you can get those strategies and procedures in place is to learn from it. So I do think 2021 and the next legislative cycle, that's going to be a huge thing. And that's why it's so important to have legislators with healthcare experience in the chambers to be able to say, hey, here's where we went wrong at, and here's what we need to improve.
Do you have any initial criticisms of where we went wrong and how you think we could have responded better?
No, again, that's out of my wheelhouse. There's a lot more people that are smarter than me that deal with these types of things. Again, I think that we are just dealing with something that is completely unprecedented. And so we're going to have to learn from it going forward. I'm not here to point blame or point fingers at people. I'm here to make sure that what I can do, which is the pharmacies that I lead and manage, that we're able to respond the best way that we can. And there'll be plenty of time to look back and see where we went wrong down the road. But right now, we got to take care of patients.
Well, right now you can probably only keep a couple weeks ahead of you at a time as things continue to develop.
Man, we're day to day right now.
Man,
Information is just changing so rapidly. I think on Monday, I heard rumblings in the pharmacy world that hydroxychloroquine was being used in other countries. So my pharmacy stocked up on that, and then that afternoon we get a call from doctors that were prescribing it, and then President Trump mentions it yesterday, and then it's hard to get now. And I think now the FDA has come out and said, maybe we're not authorizing it yet. And it's one of those things where information is changing so rapidly that you're just keeping up. So no, we're not thinking 2 weeks at a time. We're 2 hours at a time at best right now.
Yeah, and we've certainly seen, the reactionary habits of Americans across the board. So it's no surprise that you would have a run on that particular medicine as the president is mentioning it, and it's getting more and more headlines. But from the other side of things, what do you make of the supply chain discussion that's been going on more at the national level?
Yeah, that's something that we're definitely going to have to consider once we're past all this. If we're getting a lot of our drugs from other countries, and they're controlling that supply of drugs, and they're upset with us all of a sudden, they can shut that supply off, and that's not good. I think President Trump was out ahead of a lot of people the last several years on wanting to bring more manufacturing back to the United States. And if we did have that in place right now, I think we'd be doing a little bit better than we are.
So I'm going to give you at least one opportunity to reach out to the voters in House District 113. What is your message to them right now as they look at this response and they try and navigate, the many confusing news articles, or if you can call some of them that. But what is your message to the people in House District 113 right now?
Well, I think the biggest thing is to understand why the self quarantining is in place, why everything is shutting down, and it's to try to help healthcare be able to manage the burden that they're going to face in the next couple of weeks. I don't think it's not time to panic. I think there's been an incredible amount of information on how to try to mitigate this by obviously washing your hands, social distancing. Everyone knows that, but I think it's important that as we go along, that they don't get frustrated with what we're doing, that they don't panic and start going out and doing things that they're not supposed to. It's important that they trust that healthcare is going to be able to take care of them, and it's important to stay in your homes and just try to be positive. Again, this is completely unprecedented, and we're trying to figure this out as we go.
Excellent. Well, I've certainly been following your efforts on Facebook and social media as you have been leading the charge in your community from the pharmacy side. If other people want to find out more about you or just follow you and your efforts in this response, where are the best places for them to go and do that?
Yeah. So our website is willdouglasfortexas.com. All the social media channels are at WillDouglasTX. Right now, I've been on the phone the last several days. I've posted on social media about it. I was on the phone the last several days with the Texas Pharmacy Association and UT Tyler's College of Pharmacy. I just want to give a special shout out to UT Tyler, because they are really leading the charge on making sure that pharmacies have pharmacy students and interns at the ready to get out into the community and help. And like I said earlier, as as healthcare workers get sick, it's going to be important that we have those students ready to help. And so I can't thank UT Tyler enough for their leadership, and I hope that other universities and the pharmacy schools and even med schools and nursing schools follow their lead and understand that they've got some really well-educated students that they can get out into the field and help healthcare.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate you taking the time. We'll let you get back to serving your customers and your employees and your community. And once this blows over, let's have you back on so we can talk a little bit more about some of the policies that you're going to be pursuing in this race for House District 113.
Absolutely. I'd love to be on anytime. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thank you to Will for joining us. Thank you to you for listening, doing your part to social distance, flatten the curve, stop the spread, all of those things. If you haven't had a chance to, this is a great time to go back and listen to some of our other interviews before coronavirus hit, but still candidates who are out on the campaign trail. They're not able to go out and talk to voters too much right now about a variety of issues. Basically, from what I'm seeing, most folks are getting out and trying to help their local small businesses, getting the word out about local health services. The elected officials are spending time on the phone with the governor, getting regular updates on the phone with the comptroller, various statewide leaders, because this is a statewide effort. And, we have leadership from the local level all the way up to the statewide level. And we appreciate everything that's going on in DC as well, bringing those stimulus packages, making sure that we have the funding needs for CDC and all of these organizations to do their part. I'm going to be talking with Chairman James Dickey at the Republican Party of Texas today also, so be looking out for a new episode of Let's Talk Texas. We'll be going over all of the regulation changes that the governor has made, as well as talking about these elections, what it means to have them postponed, how to stay engaged, what it means for RPT and the state convention. County conventions were postponed this past weekend. So there's a lot of moving parts to this. Everyone is on their toes right now, making sure that we're trying to catch everything we can that is coming at us as far as changes and regulations through executive orders or various, decisions made by the governor passed on to state agencies, the medical boards doing all they can. It has been amazing to watch this. This is, somewhat unprecedented in the way that our modern government has had to face something like this. I'm in awe. So I hope you are too. We will continue to bring you more candidates. We have plenty more interviews lined up. If you are a candidate and you would like to get on to the podcast, we have plenty of time to do these phone interviews. So, let's get together. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram at Big Texas Podcast. Make sure you're following Texas Young Republicans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Texas YRs. We've got some training events coming up via live streaming. Matt Dorsey, our political director, is going to be helping lead the way in terms of getting folks trained on grassroots activities and stuff like that. So again, follow Texas Young Republicans on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Texas YRs. And thank you again so much. Make sure you hit that subscribe button if you're listening on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, wherever you are listening to this. Make sure you're following us. Leave us a rating. I hear it does wonders for helping us get this out for far and wide. We want as many people as possible to listen to these candidate interviews and less of me rambling about coronavirus and toilet paper and all of those kinds of random things. Till then, friends, see you down the road.